Red, green, refactor. Write a failing test, make it pass, improve the design. Commit, repeat. Now that inner loop cycle of TDD should take just a few minutes. But how good actually are you at that? Cyber-Dojo is a teaching tool that can give you feedback on how well you're doing TDD and help you to improve your cycles. You can use it for individual practice or as a group activity, a cyber coding dojo. In this video, I'm going to demo this tool and how to make your personal test-driven development practice more effective. With a skill like test-driven development, getting good at it is a matter of practice. But not just any old practice, you need feedback on how well you're doing so you can actually improve. And Cyber-Dojo was invented by Jon Jagger as a tool to help you do that. There are several features of Cyber-Dojo that give you that kind of feedback, and I'm going to showcase them today in a demo. Cyber-Dojo visualizes your TDD cycles and makes it visible if you're getting off track. It also has this feature where it forces you to explicitly say which step of TDD you're currently in and tells you if you were right. There's also a lot more of other features that can help you if you're practicing in a group, but I'm going to talk about them in a follow-up video. It's easy to get started with individual TDD practice with Cyber-Dojo. Just point your browser at cyber-dojo.org. On the front page, you can read some more about the project and about licenses, because if you're using this tool as part of your job in a training or a workshop, then you will need to buy a license. Although for personal practice, you probably don't need to worry. But if you do want to donate, the license money is actually going to a really good cause. There's this big button in the middle that says create a new practice. And if I click there, I get taken to a list of code katas that I could work on. And if you don't fancy any of these from scratch problems, you can actually click switch to custom exercises to get refactoring exercises, including a couple of my top code katas, tennis and Yahtzee. But actually, I think Cyber-Dojo is better for practicing TDD from scratch. So I suggest you go back to this list of problems. Now, there's lots to choose from here, and I fancied this one, the 12 Days of Christmas. It looks to me like it would be good for approval testing. But you can choose whichever exercise you fancy. Then this next screen asks you to choose a language and test framework. And at this point, there is so much to choose from. I mean, from very unusual languages like BCPL or, I don't know, Elixir. And if you've always wanted to try out one of these unusual languages, now is your chance. But actually, if your goal is to practice test-driven development, I suggest you pick something that you're already familiar with, a language you know and a testing framework that you've perhaps used before. So Python with PyTest, although I did want to use approvals to solve this, I'm going to show you how to do it with just normal PyTest first, and then maybe I'll go back and solve it again with an approval testing tool. So when I'm creating a new practice, it wants to know, are you on your own or are you in an ensemble or what are you doing? Today, I'm just going to show you the solo features. And then it says, okay, your practice has got this ID, and you might want to note that down in case you want to get back to this practice later and you don't want to have to search through your browser history. You can always, from the front page, find an existing practice if you know the ID. Okay, so then it says this information about version control. This is good to know. It has built-in version control, and every time you run the test, it makes a commit. And it also makes a note with a traffic light, which I'll show you in a minute. And you can use these traffic lights to revert back to that version of the files or review what you were doing in that commit, or even fork a new exercise. That can be useful, especially if you're trying to be a trainer and share exercises with a group. But for the moment, we're doing single person practice. Okay, so when we come into the Cyber-Dojo environment, it immediately has this README file with the information about the exercise I chose, which is the lyrics to the 12 Days of Christmas song. And it's got one traffic light at the start for the starting position. So you can always get back to the starting position. It's basically saying, look, there's a commit of where you are. And then here on the left, you've got some files, hiker.py, test-hiker.py. So you always start with a test case and some production code for the same problem, hiker, which is a bit of a kind of an in-joke. It's, well, what is the answer? It says here, the answer must be 42.
And then it calls this this function in the production code, and it goes 6 times 9. And you're like, 6 times 9 is not 42. Which is kind of the point. It's the plot of a science fiction book, which you may have read, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But anyway, of course, the test fails because the answer is not 42. So you get a new traffic light and a failure message. And it says, we got 54. What's going on? Okay, well, clearly the question was not 6 times 9. It was 6 times 7. Right, that should sort it out. And now we get a green traffic light and a message that the tests all passed. So in the Python version, there are 2 starting tests. In most languages, there's only 1. It's just because it doesn't know if you want to do object-oriented Python with a class or just a function. So you can choose. But yeah, that's the basic functionality. What you've got to do now is solve your code kata instead of this sample code here. This is just here to get you started. And it's the same whichever problem you've chosen. So what you'll want to do is review your problem description and write an actual proper first test. So I've gone away and done a bit of analysis of the 12 Days of Christmas song and come up with a test list that I've written here in the README file. Now, this is what you should always do basically when you're doing test-driven development. Start off by thinking about the problem and how you're going to break it down into small pieces that you can solve one by one. And each test on this list is hopefully going to turn into an actual piece of code in a minute. But as you go along, of course, you discover new things and you probably change the list. But it's good to start off with something at least. So I've kind of analysed the fact that this song, the first 2 lines are always pretty much the same. And maybe that's the first thing I should try and tackle, that first 2 lines of all the verses, basically. So I've got an idea now about what my first test case is. So I'm just running the test again to make sure everything is still green. Yeah, I didn't change anything. Good. Just comments. And now I'm going to go and try and write that first test. Although I don't want it in this file test hiker, so let's rename the file. Christmas. This is a Christmas song. I know it's only just been Christmas, but you know. I'm just going to rename these things. And then to avoid anything breaking, I also need to change this bit of code here. And then I'm going to run the tests. So this is one of the things about Cyber-Dojo, that it doesn't give you much help. There's no kind of autocomplete or fixing your imports for you. So it really pays to actually work in very small steps, running the tests often, which is exactly what you're trying to practice when you're learning TDD. So by taking away all those normal support things, it really makes you think and practice small steps. So that's a good thing. And okay, so now I need to actually write my test for the first 2 lines of the first verse. That was my plan. So I'll declare a new test case, and I'm keeping the other test cases there to remind me how test cases look in Python. I mean, I know I've got them in version control, but I find before I've got myself up and running, it's good to just keep the code there. I'll delete it in a minute. So my first test is going to call verse header function with argument 1. I want the first verse header, and that should look like this. It's a multi-line string, so it's going to be the first 2 lines of the first verse, as it says in the README. Okay, and I don't think I want the trailing white space at the end there, probably. Okay, so that's probably a reasonable first test case. And if I run that now, it's going to go with, it's going to fail with a, it doesn't find the function. So let's add the function as well. And as I said, I'm not removing any of this code. It's kind of scaffolding, reminding me what does a function in Python look like? How should I define it? So that just helps me to define my new function. And I'm just making the body empty so that my test will fail properly. Just check I've got the right kind of name and arguments. Again, let's get no help from the tool, no autocomplete. So check twice. Okay, good. My test has failed, and it's with the what I expected. I didn't, in fact, get at this lyrics as I expected. Okay, so now the next step for TDD, of course, is to make the test pass. And I'm just going to hard code it, which is a perfectly good first move in TDD. Hard code the thing that you were expecting. So I'll just copy that and paste it again. And that, I'm hoping, will make the test pass. See what Cyber-Dojo comes up with. Yes, I got a green traffic light. Okay, so that was the first TDD cycle, and you can see that my list of traffic lights here is just keeping track of what I've been doing. I've got red, green, red, green. This is going well so far. I'm going to show you one more TDD cycle because I wanted to actually show you another feature. But before I do that, I'm just going to remove all that scaffolding that we don't need anymore. I've got my first test passing, so I feel a bit more confident to get rid of all that scaffolding code that was there from the start. And honestly, I do usually keep it this long in Cyber-Dojo because I just don't have all of that autocomplete that I'm used to, and it just, you know, it helps me to get started. And when I've used Cyber-Dojo in groups, doing TDD over many years, it's a classic beginner mistake to delete all the scaffolding code and then completely forget, well, how does this language work? How do I define a test in this framework? So just avoid that by keeping the stuff in place until you've got yourself going. So I can cross off the first test from my list and start thinking about the second test. And the second test, I want to be able to do the second verse, basically. And the only difference is it says on the second day of Christmas instead of the first. So let's see if we can write that test. I'm going to turn on this feature for prediction though. So now instead of just having one test button, I'm showing you a new feature of Cyber-Dojo where it lets you actually predict what the state is going to be after you run the tests. And that is going to be quite useful for keeping track of how well I'm keeping track of my TDD cycles. So if you've never done TDD before, maybe it's a bit beyond what you need, but maybe the second time you do your code kata, you could switch this on. So I want to show you how it works. So we're going to first define the test case here. The first two lines of the second verse. As I said, it's pretty much the same as the first one, except it's on the second day of Christmas. And we need to pass the to argument there. Okay, so now I can use this new predict feature, and I reckon this is going to fail because I haven't written any production code for the second verse yet. So clearly it's going to fail. Yes. And Cyber-Dojo has told me it's failed, and the traffic light now has this additional little check mark next to it to say that, yep, I predicted that right. It did fail. So I was right about keeping track of my TDD cycles. Okay, so let's see. It's as expected, as pointed out, that I'm still saying the first day of Christmas. And now I should be able to fix that. Okay, so do the simplest thing that could possibly work. That's the next step of TDD. So I think the simplest thing here is just to put another if statement in. So detect the different arguments. So if we're putting in 2, then we can return basically the text for the second verse. So this is totally cheating and isn't what I'm going to have when I end up with this, but you're allowed to cheat in this part of TDD. Just write what it's expecting with an if statement, and then this time it should pass. Great. And I was right with my prediction. Cool, but that's not good enough. I need to do some refactoring. This is clearly not the best code I could write. So the first thing to do is to make the if statement smaller. What if I just parameterize the string and with verse name? It's usually the first verse, but if the number is 2, then it's going to be second. And then if I make this an F string, I can parameterize it basically with this verse name. Okay, so that was a small step in the right direction, I think. Yep, it's still working. That was a valid refactoring. I think I could do even better. Now I saw this, I realized actually, why don't I put the verse names in a list? And then the index of the list is clearly related to the argument that I pass in. Because lists are 0 indexed, I need to -1. Then I don't need that. And that should still work. So that was some successful refactoring, and I got 3 new green blobs on my list. So This is how Cyber-Dojo is helping you to keep track of your TDD cycles. It's going, red, green, 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 red, green, green, red, green, green, green. This is good. Red, green, refactor. The additional greens there indicate you're refactoring successfully. So this is a good sign. I've gone on and done a bit more TDD now to show you another feature of Cyber-Dojo. It can help you spot when you've gone wrong. Now, my tests are failing, and you can see from the list of traffic lights that they've been failing for some time. I wrote this test and then I thought I was going to get it to pass and, it didn't quite work. I'll just try this other thing and this other thing. And before you know it, you've got a long row of red tests and you're not actually making it pass. This is a typical beginner mistake, taking too big a step. The test that I was trying for, I did the whole first verse and I thought, I'll try the whole second verse. How hard can it be? I've got the first verse working. And it turned out to be a lot more difficult than I thought. And this is something that happens even to experienced practitioners. The test that you wrote was a little bit large and you couldn't get it to pass in one go. The trick is to notice all of those red traffic lights and stop and go back to green and try again with a smaller test. So this was the last time my tests were green, when I got the first verse working. And here if I just click on that traffic light in Cyber-Dojo, it will show me that's where I was. And then I can revert to this point where I had green tests and I get a new traffic light saying it was a revert. And at this point, I'm back to green. Now I'm back to green, I can take stock and work out what I should have done instead. This is my test list. I've crossed off the whole first verse test, but not the whole second verse test. But that was too big a step, so I need another step in between. Let's try something where instead of trying to format everything perfectly, let's just get the lines of the second verse in a list in the right order. And then from there, hopefully I'll be able to then format that into the whole second verse. So I'm going to write that as a new test case. Test lines of second verse. So I think I need a new function here. Verse lines. I'll give the verse number that I want. And then for the second verse, I should get a list with two elements, which are the in the right order. So let's see what order they should be in. 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. Yes, okay. So let's put that in here. Okay, and then I need to start working on my new function. No, not start working on my new function. I need to actually just make this test fail first. So let's just put in the function header. And this should now fail. Nope, syntax error. Okay, what have I done wrong? Oh, I forgot my brackets. Now I'm expecting it to fail. Great, I've got my failure, and now I can go and make this pass. This should be a little easier than before. I know what the lines are. Let's put them in a list. So that's the first verse line, and the second verse. Put that in the list as well. And now, of course, they're in the kind of the right order of which verse number they've got, but they're not in the right order to display. I'm going to need to reverse that list. So maybe that will do the trick. No. Python error. It's giving me an iterator, not a list. Oh, I can easily turn that back to a list though. Do I want to do that here in the test? I don't know. At the moment, that's going to make the test pass. And now I can go and review if that's actually what I need in order to get the second verse working. But I think I'm going to stop there and leave that for you. My Cyber-Dojo list of traffic lights is looking a little more healthy now. I'm back at green.
Well, that was an introduction to using Cyber-Dojo for individual test-driven development practice. I do recommend you try it out for yourself. And if you like it, you can repeat the same exercise in a future session. And hopefully over time you'll notice a progression in how good your TDD cycles start to look. Concrete signs of improvement like this are actually very encouraging. The feedback you get from Cyber-Dojo helps you to be self-critical and get more out of your practice. Originally though, this tool was conceived as something for group learning, hence the name Cyber-Dojo. You're trying to raise the competency and fluency with TDD of a whole team together. I've previously spent many happy hours in those kinds of sessions. It makes practice more fun when there are more people about. I'm going to save demonstrating the additional functionality for groups for a future video. But in the meantime, I hope you'll be able to get started practicing test-driven development using Cyber-Dojo. Happy coding!